All right, so we're now recording. So what we're going to start today is on something that we call the okay, not okay theory. And this sounds so basic, but it's really something I believe when you walk away today. Now, this is for the majority of people. But when you walk away from this today, over the next couple of days, the next week, 2 weeks, you are going to see this in play all the time. So a couple of rules that we've got at Sandler, and really we only dedicate one, maybe a couple of slides, not a ton of pages to this theory, but we'll talk about it quite frequently in short little segments. So the first thing is always let the prospect preserve his or her dignity. That is Sandler rule number one about keeping a prospect okay. The second thing is, since most people want to feel okay about themselves, the way to feel okay about themselves is to find someone else who is more not okay than they are. So let's just take that for a second. Think about television shows that, today and actually the last several years that tend to do very well. Reality TV. Why do people love to watch reality TV?
Why did you say?
Yeah, why do people love reality TV?
I don't know, they like watching a train wreck.
And why do we like to watch a train wreck?
Because you're watching, it's not you. That's happening to you.
It's not me. So when it's not me, I feel better about myself. Now, I'm actually following the Howard Stern rule of watching TV because I've been watching The Bachelorette with my wife and daughter, and I'm like, oh my God, or The Bachelor, either one. I'm getting sucked in. I have to admit, now it's being recorded, so I got to be careful here. But reality TV is a great example of people finding their okayness. In the world of sales, let's think about that prospect and where we started this program, which is, how does the prospect feel about a salesperson?
Not very good. They want to watch the salesperson.
They love to watch the salesperson melt down. Alex, what were you going to say?
I was going to say with disdain.
With disdain. Sheila, Julie, anything you guys would add to how do we feel about that salesperson?
They feel like they have the upper hand.
They feel like the salesperson has the upper hand.
No, that they have the upper hand.
They absolutely. And what happens if I give up the upper hand to a salesperson?
You're sold. Down. You lose control.
I lose control. So that's my not okayness. I'm not feeling great about the situation. So I got to do everything in my power to stay okay. So the moment I don't feel okay, I will lose control. If a salesperson, and Alex, you might be a good example of this, you sell social media services in a very generic sense. I'm putting it, so not giving it as much credit as it is. If we talk in buzzwords, if we talk about technology or tools that I don't know about, go back to your school days when you didn't know the answer to a question or didn't know a piece of information. What would you typically do?
Frustrated, yet, I always say, I've always heard, a confused prospect always says no. So
where'd you hear that from?
Joe and the rest of the guys.
I don't believe you heard it from Joe.
You've learned well, young Jedi.
A confused prospect always says no, because I'm going to put words in your mouth, but I'll take it in my own, in the way I hear it. If I don't get it, I am shutting down. I'm shutting you out, and that is an automatic, let me think it over, let me get back to you. I'm going to clam up, keep my cards close to my vest, because right now I'm not feeling uncomfortable. So we've got this other line here. Alex, I love that statement. And Joe, actually, if it's from you, it's a great statement. I just wrote it down.
If I could embellish on it too, Dave, yeah. The confused mind says no because they can't say yes to something they don't understand, and they don't want to look stupid. So by being confused, and if they ask a question, then they feel as though they're looking uneducated, or they don't understand, or stupid in some way. So they're just going to clam up, like you said, which is very appropriately put. And by not asking any questions, the response will be, well, let me think about it.
Absolutely.
And when they say they have to think about it, that's them trying to look intelligent by them using the word think, because they think, therefore they are. And that's where you end up chasing them, trying to convince them of something that they were just confused about.
Bingo. And if I don't feel comfortable, if I don't feel okay in my shoes, I will shut down. A great example of this is not only do we do work with some printing companies, there happens to be a lot of print. I'm sure it's in any populated area, but there's a lot of companies here that sell print, so it's promotional products, maybe shirts or flyers, you name it. And I'll never forget a sales guy saying to somebody, do you want that in 4-color or 3-color? And the prospect goes, I have no idea what they're talking about. You are not getting that piece of business, because some of us might understand 4-color, 3-color. I certainly don't understand it. I know the term because anything we get from Sandler says 4C or 3C in the name, so I know it's 4-color or 3-color. I know nothing more about it. But if I am the person that doesn't understand, right over my head, clam up, shut down. So the idea of keeping a prospect okay means we've got to be, as salespeople, less okay than the prospect. Now there's a number here. 98% of the population wants to feel okay about themselves. And so there's a funny clip with David Sandler going, the other 2% are just drug addicts and people on the street or something. So, but 98% of the population wants to feel okay about themselves. So pretty much everybody you're dealing with wants to feel good about their interaction. And we've got to do everything. And we're already coming in at a psychological disadvantage that I don't trust the salesperson. That's the buyer's mindset. So I'm already feeling not okay. So I got to do things that make the prospect feel better about themselves. So we've got tools and techniques. Reversing. Clarify what you're asking. Because if I'm asking, Sheila, if I ask you a question about leadership and transformation, and I'm from one of your prospects, let's say, who knows more about leadership and employee transformation than you? Does the prospect know more?
No, matter of fact, we deal with mostly culture. So oftentimes the prospect has no idea how big culture is, how big of a problem it is, or so we're frequently the experts over the client.
Yeah, and Dan understands culture. So you and Dan having a conversation, we could talk at 300 or 400 level college course about culture. But if it's our prospect, we've got to make sure we fully understand what they're asking us. So we've got the reversing techniques. We've got things like the dummy curve. Hey, does this drawer, if I were buying a new dresser, is this made with ball bearings? Well, are ball bearings important to you? Or would you rather have something that just glides on wheels? We've got to ask that additional question. So keeping your prospect okay almost feels like we've got to fall back a little bit and nurture our prospects through this sales process. Keep them feeling good. And when you think about things, Joe, did you want to jump in?
No, finish your thought. Go ahead.
Yeah. So think about bonding and rapport. What's the first step of the Sandler or any sales process we're going to learn?
Building rapport.
Building rapport, right? So imagine I walk into somebody's office and they've got a picture of, and Sandler always uses the example of a sailfish. This is a real story from they became our client, but the sales guy walked in and the business owner he was dealing with, or whoever he was dealing with, had a picture from down, South Florida, a 70-pound marlin that they had caught. And the sales guy walks in, oh, awesome, where'd you catch that? How big was it? 70 pounds. And the sales guy goes, you know what, I caught one. It was about 108 pounds. What did he just do to the prospect?
Blew it.
He blew it. He outdid the prospect. Joe, I'm going to pause so you can jump in.
Dave, the thing I'm thinking of is, and I don't know if it's right in line, but it's something I've always used, was whenever I hear somebody say something, and even though I completely understand it, I'm going to ask them to explain it to me like I'm 2 years old. I always use that phrase, and they smile and go, really? I said, yeah, it's the only way I could really grasp your thinking. Sometimes it's to help me really understand them, but most of the time, I'm just drawing them out so that they're going to give me as much information as I possibly can, because they're going to give me the data I need to ultimately close them. So by asking them that question, can you explain it? I hear what you're saying, but could you explain it to me like I'm 2 years old, just so I completely understand it?
Yep.
And it puts me, it doesn't make me feel any less for doing that, because I'm controlling it, but at the same time, I'm making them feel good about me wanting to know more information. And
Absolutely.
that elevates them to make them feel good about themselves, and then they want to give you more information.
Yeah. And who do people like talking about the most?
Themselves.
So if we understand that, themselves, and if we understand that, we understand this okay, not okay theory, and Joe uses the term, hey, can you explain it to me like a second grader? Again, that's a great guide. We have another client who loves this term. And I've actually, I don't know if I stole it from him or he stole it from me or where it works. Hey, I'm not the smartest guy. Can you please explain that again? I'm not the smartest guy in the room, but here's what I think I'm hearing. And it puts him in a very vulnerable state. And all of a sudden, he's not okay. And what does the prospect come to do? They become much more okay. So we're not there to battle prospects. We're there to actually make them feel okay through the selling process. So I just want to share one other piece, and then we could talk a little bit more about this or keep moving. So in our real lives, and this is where I think we get the greatest lesson of this, and maybe I'll share a quick story also. But if you watch in real life conversations that occur, whether you're involved with them or whether you're observing, you will hear consistent stories of not okayness being created. For example, Sheila, where was your last vacation? Where'd you go?
Disney World.
How many days did you go?
We were gone 8 days.
That's it? All right, I'm going to stop right there.
It was too much.
That's too much. But that's it. Oh, the last time I was there, Sheila, we went for 2 weeks because you can't see everything in 8 days. So you will hear your friends have these stories over and over again. You know that guy, that woman who are always, Alex, where's the last place you went out for dinner?
A little Italian restaurant.
What's the name of it?
Fiorella's.
Oh, I know a better place than that. Yeah, way better than Fiorella's. You got to be kidding me. I can't believe you spent your good money. I know I'm exaggerating. Everybody on this call knows somebody like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody knows somebody. So we got to be aware that there is a lot of not okayness being created. We could do it as salespeople. We can use buzzwords. I was on a call with somebody the other day. Interesting. CEO of a company, small company here in Jackson, New Jersey. They appear to do very well. But I said, so tell me about your pipeline. And the CEO says, what's a pipeline? And I was standing right here. I went, oh my God, I am talking on a different level. So I did what Joe said. I said, oh, you know what? Not everybody understands the terms that I use. Let me explain what I mean by a pipeline. And I spent the next 120 seconds defining what that was. She goes, oh, I get it. Yeah, I've never heard it called that. So all of a sudden,
David, don't be so naive. That CEO probably was making you feel okay and disarming you as a salesperson, because I do that all the time with salespeople.
Could, you know what? And if she did, she gets an A+.
I saw a CEO one time in a group of people. He was the president of the company, and this college kid was at the table, and he was holding court, basically. And the kid brought up the fact that he shoots a crossbow. Now, he was in his late 40s at the time, and he said, "Crossbow, what's that?"
That is, yeah.
And I sat there and I said, there is no effing way that guy does not know what a crossbow is.
Yeah.
But he made that kid feel really good about himself, that the president of the company was engaging him on something that he was interested in, and he drew him out, and that kid went on to sell a lot, in part because of that.
Yeah.
So I've seen that done in so many different circles. So don't be confused. That they wanted to make sure you knew what you were talking about to do business with them.
I tell you what, quite possible. But it was a moment where we got to slow it down. Quick story, and then we'll move off of this and actually take any other feedback. This, to me, is so important in sales. And it's funny because we've got some really not, Sheila, Julie, Joe's got a pretty heavy sales background, Alex. Dan, I think that you've probably fit more in the world of some of the other folks. Not that heavy sales background. Not crazy. Julie, you might be a little bit more of a heavier sales background. But we've watched salespeople who we believe that they should dominate and direct prospects. And what we've really learned is they got to make them feel comfortable. They got to make them feel okay and do things like Joe said on purpose to make them feel well. So just a quick story, because this is very powerful, and I want you to look for it when you're personal life out in the field. We were buying a heating and air conditioning unit. It's 4 years ago, March. And I'll never forget, there's a company in Princeton and very well, high reputation. So we invite them out, or I invite them out. My wife puts me in charge of this one. I have decision-making capabilities on this.
No, you don't.
Yeah. And the guy runs through. That's Joe's cousin. And the guy runs through the options. And we are about 45 minutes into, I'll call it his pitch, for lack of a better word. And I said, if you had to think about it, do you really think that this unit is the right one for my house? And he goes, I got the same one in my house, and my house is 30% bigger than yours. So now, sales trainer, 4 years ago, kind of understand what I'm talking about. I go two directions, and I want more of you guys or ask too many questions here. There's two directions you can go. One is you can say, we got a problem. Why am I buying a unit that's 30% larger? Or not okay. And I can assure you this guy has lost a ton of deals because he's walked out of houses where people have said just something about that guy. Don't know what it is. Can't put my finger on it. Something about that guy. What it caused me to do is I saw that. That might be subconscious, but I guarantee he's losing sales. What it did cause me to do is go out and do some homework, and I very quickly learned that my 99.1% efficient unit would not be 99% efficient in my house because the duct size for that unit needed to be larger than what's already in my house. Homework that I had no intention of doing. That's what this theory does. We got to be aware. And remember, we talked about rapport building and upfront contracts all throughout the sub. That would be an example of losing rapport really close to the closing portion of a sale. I'm going to shut up there. Anybody, any other thoughts, questions? Have you seen this? Do you know somebody like that? Anybody, or I'll keep moving here.
I just think it's so easy to get into that trap. I've seen it done before, and one of my former colleagues just would rub even me the wrong way with what he'd do. You have to keep in mind that it's all about the prospect. It's not about you as a salesperson.
It really is, and we've got to let our ego go, and I don't need to be. And Joe, I think your story actually hits this home. I don't need to be the smartest guy in the room. And that CEO story that you shared is a great example. That is somebody so comfortable in their skin that he is willing to use the dummy curve. Remember, I know the answer, but I'm just throwing out bait to see who bites on it. And he gets a kid super excited, feeling real good about themselves. It's a great way to get people feeling good about you, feeling good about your process, and feeling good about themselves. All right, we beat that up a little bit. I'm going to get us back over here. So last week, we talked about questioning, or 2 weeks ago, we talked about questioning strategies. And we talked about the idea of answering a question with a question, and then the rule of 3+. And I think we even shared some of these examples and maybe some softening statements. Does that ring a bell to everybody?
Yep.
So what I'd like for us to do is actually take a minute and just write down some real field questions, statements, objections that you might hear at all different points of the selling process. So what are some tough questions, statements that people make to you? They could occur at the beginning, the end of a sale. It doesn't matter. Things like, how much is this going to cost at the beginning of a sales process? Or tell me about the results you've gotten with other people. Give you a second to jot a couple down. The reason I do this exercise is because the reversing is relatively a logical process, pretty easy to think about. You know, Alex asked me if I want to go get a cup of coffee. I say, hey, thanks for asking. Why is that important to you? That's pretty easy. But at some point, we got to start reversing in real life. People are going to throw things at us. So how do we do that? How do we get prepared? And there's going to be times, and I can even share a story, there's going to be times where we feel like we got to reverse, and it's inappropriate. Reversing at the wrong times is inappropriate. And I might have shared this, Julie, I feel like I shared it with you, but I had a prospect, so this goes way back. I was in my old office because I'll never forget it, and the light bulb went off during the sales meeting, and I said, boy, I haven't reversed there in a long time. So she said, can I look at your training materials? And I said, that's a great question. Why do you ask? She goes, because I'd like to look at the training materials. So that would be an example of, you don't have to reverse all the time, but there are times where you can, where maybe you don't think you're able to. So who's got a couple of questions maybe that are tough, that are more field related, and maybe you get stuck on them, you're just not sure how to handle?
Why will you be different?
I'm going to just add more to that.
Yeah, why will you be different than, current provider or what everybody,
Yeah.
everybody tells you that, is another one.
Everybody. Wait, that's another one that people say?
Yeah, when you say, we can help you out with your search engine optimization. Well, everybody tells me that.
All right, that's great. That's not even a question, and we can reverse it.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Sheila, why don't you throw a couple out there?
I have a statement, because we've been talking about this a lot lately, organizations that don't realize they have a problem with their culture. So the statement is, we don't have a problem with our culture.
Oh, that's a tough one. Dan's going to take that one.
Do you deal with companies in our industry?
We're in senior living.
No, I'm adding another one. Do you deal with another?
Oh.
I'm familiar, yeah. But do you deal with
Sheila, you were supposed to reverse it anyway.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sheila owes us all $1 right now.
I hear the one that he just mentioned a lot too. Like, do you deal with companies specifically like ours? But I have another one that I hear a lot that I always fold on because I'm like, oh, where do I go from there? that, oh, this is a small rural community. We know our targets. We've already called everyone there is to call. We've already written every policy there is to write around here. And people don't like to be approached that way. So I hear that a lot. That's a whole bunch of objections in one, but
This is a small community. We've already.
we know who our target is, and people don't like to be contacted that way. They're getting too many phone calls. We're a rural place. There's nowhere else to go if they've already written everything. If they aren't going to go out to any further zip codes, meaning if they're going to go out and take the pictures and file the insurance claim, they have to be able to drive there. So they've already hit their geo target, is what they're saying.
Okay.
And I fold on that one. So
And again, that's very specific to one of a kind. So let's see if,
yeah.
Typically when we start to throw these types of questions up, and this is the beauty of having people from different industries, is that Alice is going to have an easier time handling your question, Julie. Sheila's going to have an easier time answering Alex's question. Dan will have an easier time answering my question. So easier to be a Monday morning quarterback. Alex, do you have a couple that you want to throw up here?
How much in sales is this going to bring me?
A lot of we get a lot of results questions.
The one that I commonly get is, we already use this system. Can your system integrate with ours, or what we're already doing?
I get a recruiting question all the time.
What's that?
How long have you been doing this for?
Oh,
I always say since noon on Thursday.
I like that.
It disarms them anyway.
one of my favorite responses was the first law firm that we actually ever trained. I didn't lie. They said, how many law firms have you trained? And I said, well, you would be the first one that we've trained. And they said, well, that's just not possible. But you were. So whatever you say sometimes can come off pretty well.
When I would go out looking for office space, when we were in the kitchen knife business, landlords would say, what industry are you in? I'd say drugs, prostitution, gambling, whatever makes a buck. And they'd laugh. And then anything I said after that sounded better than the original answer. So I figured I was.
Isn't that the truth? Isn't that the truth? I'm trying to expand this, but I'm going to struggle. So let's leave it at this. Let's see if I can just get back in here because I touched something, and that's never good when I touch something. What we're going to try to do now is, there I'm in. Let's try to reverse some of these because these are more realistic. We can come out with the textbook questions, and we can vary textbook. If we remember the formula of reversing, it's a softening statement. Hey, it's a great question. Why'd you ask? Or that's a great question. Glad you asked. Thanks for asking. All that stuff, that softening makes them feel okay. We do softening statements to nurture them through the process. The moment somebody asks me a tough question, especially one that maybe they should know the answer to, and we nurture it by softening it, we make them feel okay about asking questions. That's going to allow them to continue to talk. So we soften first, and then we reverse. And in some cases, the beauty of using some of these is we can potentially, and I don't know how this is going to play out until we dig in, but potentially we could use their words and recraft the statement back to them in the form of a reverse. And when we restate words back to prospects, what does that tell the prospect we've been doing?
Listening.
We're listening to you. So we can give them back their words, which is, again, not specifically in the textbook or the slides that we're pointing out. So why would you be different than who I use? Who wants to take a stab at softening it and reversing it? Take a moment, not an easy one. Did I stump everybody?
That's what we deal with all the time, waiting to hear an answer.
Oh, I was talking and my mute was on. Sorry, Dave.
That's all right. Go ahead.
I was saying you might say something like, that's a great question. It might help me to know some of the things that you like about who you're currently using in order for me to answer that. And you can tell me that's horrible if that's horrible.
Why is it horrible?
That's
I don't
what
think
said.
anybody
Just
here.
feel free to tell me if that was horrible. I just took a stab.
No. We absolutely. This is about this is a question that we have for years. Joe, how many years of sales experience do you have?
Too many, 38.
This was in Joe's second year. There was a script that said, here's how you handle that question. We are different because blah, 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 blah. Right? All the features and benefits. We are changing. We're moving this into a completely different direction. So that's awesome. It's a great start. That's a great question. What do you like about who you're using?
And then,
Before I can tell you why we're different.
and then following up, I assume it would be following up with questions. So what don't you like then? You know, what is it that you think that you would change working with somebody new? In other words, it falls under the banner of answering a question with question.
What would you change if you worked with someone new? Now, let's go back to basic reversing. Joe's second year in sales. What would you do different than who I use? The reverse then was, well, who do you use? Oh, and they're no good. So there was the reverse, who do you use? But now we're drawing more out from them. These are awesome. It's an awesome question. I don't know if we're much different. I don't know if we're much different. We could add more. What is that behind when I say I don't know if we're much different?
The dummy curve.
I'm dummy curve, which is behind the pendulum. Remember the pendulum theory? Sheila, that's probably a new term to you. So I might be making you feel not okay right now. I got to be careful. But I'm behind the pendulum. Hey, we may not be very different. Boom, I'm falling back. I'm going behind the pendulum. I'm being a little bit of a dummy. They're going to come back and help me get out of it because I'm making them feel real good. What would you change if you work with someone new? Awesome. What else could you say here? These are two awesome ones.
What are some of the things you don't? Yeah. What don't you like about it? And
I could say, again, let's go back to, I'm going to just add what I believe is a layer of complexity, maybe not. And I would take the first two, and maybe what I would say is there something different that you're looking for? It's a great question. Is there something different, their word, that potentially you're looking for? Again, maybe just a small little adjustment there. Making some sense? All right. And I'm not saying you have to be scripted out in the field. This is about just getting this a little bit of brain exercise because we have yet to be conditioned on how to answer questions with questions. Just not the way we were brought up. Everyone tells me that. What's the problem with that? Is that a statement or a question?
that's a statement.
Yeah, so sometimes statements can be reformulated, and I think we talked about this 2 weeks ago, into believing it is a question. So sometimes we will default to answering it. Well, everyone tells me that. Yeah, but we are different. I'm telling you, we've worked with so many people. We've really got this locked and loaded. However, we still follow the same formula. Soften, then reverse. So how would you soften that one up?
I bet you do hear that a lot.
And then what would be your reverse?
When they tell you that, how do you feel?
I'll clean this up. I'm going to get it over to Word, and then I can send it out to you guys as a little bit of a cheat sheet. I bet you do hear that a lot. When they tell you that, how do you feel? What else?
What about, you could say something like, I understand. Can you tell me what you were expecting and where the ball was dropped?
Beautiful. That's two outstanding ones. Anyone else?
I would just say, again, piggyback on what Julie had said, and kind of going into a little bit, this is kind of a pain funnel question, if I'm not mistaken, but can you be more specific as to what they didn't end up doing for you?
You got to soften it first, though.
Yeah, I'm gonna just slide it over. Understanding, I think Alex would have softened it if there weren't a couple
I
of
was just
examples.
assuming that we were using.
Yep.
Yeah.
Very interesting take, Alex. I want to go down your path a little bit because you referred to the pain funnel,
Mm-hmm.
and again, Sheila, we might need to get you caught up a little bit on pain funnel, but every one of these questions that you asked, Alex is literally comes out of the pain funnel. The pain funnel is a guide, but the other ones could be used in the pain conversation. That's all that they're doing. So when you look at the pain funnel and you look at this idea of reversing, softening plus reversing, they really do fit together. And the pain funnel provides an awesome guide when we get stuck. That's what it's there for. But you reformulate all the questions. You craft the question as you're on the fly or based upon how you are getting prepared for meetings. These are excellent, all of the above. We're doing awesome. All right, you want to try a hard one?
You're making us feel really okay right now.
Yeah, this is good, but this is very good. So I know we're being recorded, but you guys are really hitting this well. You never know where it's going to go. This one is not easy, I don't think. We don't have a problem with our culture.
Really? That's great. How did you establish? Or what do you base that on?
Now, Joe, I think you came off with a really good answer. What's dangerous about this type of question is if I'm in Sheila and Dan's shoes or anybody's shoes, we don't have a problem with blank. It immediately hits us between the eyes as salespeople, and it may make us feel not okay. And when we don't feel okay, we come back, maybe unintentionally, a little bit defensive. So this is a hard one in the field. But wait a second, we can do this. Or wait, don't you have a problem with this, this, and this? And we start to move into sales mode. We start to get out ahead of the pendulum. And the whole idea and that question that Joe threw out is great, is it keeps us behind the pendulum. Really, it's great. How'd you pull that off?
And then really drill down on all the things they talk about.
Okay?
So
one thing I usually do is I'll mention, that's great, but when I speak with leaders like yourself, sometimes they express that they have a nice culture, but they also show that they have frustration with teams not being able to get, achieve targeted business outcomes. Does this happen at your company? And that usually sets them off.
And then there's, I would call that a little bit of 30-second commercial. But when I speak with leaders like you, here are some of the things that they tell me. Dan, I know Dan has gone pretty far ahead in some of the online material. So I don't know if Dan is stealing Sandler stuff or if Dan's really got this locked and loaded. However, when Dan moved this to a third-party story, what happens when we move it to a third-party story? Anybody want to take a guess? I'm not asking the question great, but I want to throw it out there. What happens?
It means that you're now this decision isn't being made about them personally, or it's not about anything that you said. It's becoming about just a decision, right? Kind of, or no?
You're spot on, Joe. Keep going.
Yeah, they see themselves in it, but it's not about them.
Yeah, because if I had my baseball bat, what do we really want to do with the baseball bat?
Hit them over the head with it.
And say, you got a problem here. What happens when we tell somebody that they got a problem?
They get confused and deny. they go into denial.
They go into denial. I don't have that problem. I don't have that problem.
Right.
That's the other guy's problem. But when I say somebody else has a problem, or even when somebody else is doing really well, people often want to be part of that group. Plus, they're more willing to admit that they have an issue when we make it not about them. So Dan, there's a lot of brilliance in what you just threw out is, let's shift this over to a third-party story and move it away from them so we don't hit them over the head with the bat and make them feel not okay. We need to put them in pain. And this is a little bit of a balancing act because we got to put them in pain. We do have to beat them up, but we're going to nurture them through the pain process. And that's what Dan's doing here.
Dave, nobody wants to be first, nobody wants to be last, and nobody wants to be left out. And that's the power of the third party analogy.
Yeah, Joe, actually, there's a study done, and I'm gonna go back and look at it, which actually sums up exactly what you just said. And I believe it's specific data that talks about what percentage of people want to be part of the group, and how if you can make this group out here, it draws people in. So spot on. That's perfect. How about, do you deal with companies in our industry? Sheila, are you good with that one? We don't have a problem with our culture? That was yours, right?
Yeah, that's great.
Okay, as long as it's helpful. How about, do you deal with companies in our industry? I like this one. Julie and I happen to have talked about it a couple of weeks back. So it's pretty fresh. And how would you handle that one?
Should I be quiet because we already covered it?
Yeah, because we're going to blow their minds in a minute.
I'm cheating. Okay.
We're going to give you guys, and I didn't create it, so I wish I had, but we're going to give you some super insight, one of the best takeaways ever. It's really not that good, but it sounds cool. So how would you handle this one? Do you deal with companies in our industry? Go back to basics.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I would just say curious. Why do you ask?
And not furious. I'll fix that.
Doesn't that, I've tried that, and I find that the only answer you get is because I want to know if you could handle companies like ours.
Yeah.
And it's almost like insulting when you ask that question. I'm trying to find the right question to ask.
Yeah, this is a tough one, but I think you always want to go back to basics, because the basics will often get you through the process. And Joe, you're right. This is kind of cutting the edge here. So this could be, I don't know what the percentage is. Let's make it up. 50% of people go with you. 50% do exactly what Joe said and say, God, come on, just answer the freaking question. I really want to know. Any other stabs in the dark?
I always been saying that's a great question. We deal with all kinds of companies, from accountants to zoologists and everything in between. So I guess you would fall in there. They go, well, can you give me some referrals to companies in my industry? I say, we don't refer our customers out. Just like you wouldn't want to be bothered by, people kicking the tires. We don't bother our customers with them. But you can go to our website and see the testimonials. So that's my standard answer, but I'm not happy with it.
Yeah, this is a tough one, and we're going to let you in. And I think that this is one spot where this technique will work. And by the way, these are two good reverses. They will get us through, and we'll get better. But there is, and Julie and I talked about this, but years ago, working with one of my colleagues, there's a question that I can actually reverse this one. So I'm going to go a little bit differently. This is not a Sandler technique. I don't know what the technique would be called, but it's, you know what? So Joe, imagine you asked me this question. I'd say, Joe, it's a great question. And I just had this last Wednesday, so it's fresh in mind. The guy goes, do you deal with companies just like us, B2B? Boom. It's a great question. And you know what? And we do terrific in that space. But can I tell you the real question you should be asking us? Pause. That was my reverse back to him. Can I tell you the real question you should be asking? And he goes, yeah, what? Do we handle the issues that your company is dealing with?
I love it.
And the answer to that is 100%.
I love
So
it.
I don't know what that technique is. It is absolutely a reverse. It absolutely goes in there. So we actually, the person that taught me, I have it up on my screen. Oh, actually, it's on my home computer. It is reframing the question. So there are times in sales calls, and as we get better about understanding which questions are right, straightforward, which runs, they're really not asking us the right question, we have, in a nurturing process, a way to reframe, not in a Sandler textbook, the question that we are being asked. Absolutely a methodology that is super advanced. And I told Julie this part. We have a guy who does management consulting. He's really sharp. He's been with us for a couple of years. He does some work. He's a client, awesome guy, retired. When we taught this several years ago, when we first learned it, probably been about 4 or 5, maybe even longer. I'd have to look at the date. We taught it. We said, okay, here's another way to reverse. 10-minute snippet in class. Let's talk about this. And he goes, you know what? I just watched. They were doing like a naval, some debriefing about an attack or a setup. And somebody from the news media asked a rear admiral or somebody from the Navy a question. And he goes, I think you know the answer to that. But you know what question you really should be asking me? And the guy, Tom, goes, Dave, I just stopped. And I said, what a great technique. And now you're telling us. But he was blown away how the guy took control of the meeting or of the news conference and got them to focus on what he wanted to focus on. So it's not just specific to this. That technique, actually, David Sandler, there are some additional reversing techniques, and one is called Ask Me a Question. And you could say to somebody, hey, Sheila, you know what question you should be asking me? You should ask me about my experience working with companies like yours. Get to it before they do. So maybe that's where that fits under. I'll type that out and save this to a Word document and get it out to you guys.
Dave, that's so accurate. And it's funny because I do that in another scenario. When people say to me, well, how many employees do you have? I said, well, actually, you should be asking me a different question. They said, what's that? So you should be asking me how many people I have working for me. And the answer is about a third. And they laugh. And I say, so we have about 25 or 30 or 50 or whatever the number is. But I give them the answer, but I diffuse it by getting them to understand that there's more to it than meets the eye.
Absolutely.
So.
Yeah, so you're using it there. We don't always think about using it in some of these other spaces.
Yeah, it's interesting.
And we can. And think about the upfront contract that we're setting up. We've got prospects agenda, we've got our agenda, and one of the things I think I taught you guys was when we set up the agenda, it's, hey, Sheila, here's something I think we should talk about. We're doing that. We're gently guiding, we're gently directing these prospects through a process. Not to manipulate, but truly to bring them from start to finish. And a good finish is still a no. We want more yeses, but a good finish could be a no. I'm going to pause there. I will save this. I'll email it out to you guys so you've got it. You can build on it and add to it. It's great to have as a cheat sheet to just reflect and make sure we're doing this. You will be in the field over the next 2 weeks. You will have experiences where somebody asks you a question and you're not sure. You throw it here. Here's what I will assure you. If you get a question in the field and you write it down and your reverse isn't what you want it to be or how you handle it in the field isn't what you want it to be, and you write it down and redraft how you would have handled it next time, you will handle it 1,000 times better the next time when you're in the field. It only takes one try. That's all it takes. This isn't, I got to study, I got to do this. You do it one time, you will be, I don't know what they say, cooking with gas. Is that the right term? There you go.
That's great
That
advice.
works.
That is great advice. When I first started, I used to show you how far back it goes. I used to keep all my sales calls on index cards because there was no computers. And when I'd leave the appointment, I would write down either what was sold or the objection I got. And when I got that objection, I would go home and think of the answer, and I'd write down the answer on that objection. And that turned into me studying those cards on how to respond to the different objections. And my closing ratio just went through the roof because of that little exercise.
Because it's never going to happen again, and you're prepared to handle it. All right, we're above time. I'm gonna stop the recording, actually, and